So today's video is going to be different for a lot of reasons. So I'm not feeling very well today, so it's just going to be kind of an audio recording for today's video. I'm also not going to be showing you anything today, any like samples of what I did this week, which I'll get into later, and this video should be a little bit shorter. So now that that's out of the way, we're just gonna jump right into it. So this is week 6 of my Code Crew Code School journey, and this week, if you remember from my last video, was a project week. So for the first 2 days, or for the first day, excuse me, we worked on 2 mini projects, which were just 2 half-day projects, and they were basically just making really simple games using HTML, CSS, JavaScript, or jQuery. These games were really fun, and I might actually drop an image of what the games look like now that I think about it. But for the rest of the week, Tuesday through Friday, we worked on a full 4-day project, and this project was a student portfolio. So the assignment was to create a portfolio website from scratch using HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and jQuery. And there were some guidelines, so we had to have like an About Me page, some way for the user to contact us, somewhere to display our projects and our reflections, which is, what these weekly videos are, and then a few other really basic portfolio website necessities. But besides those few guidelines, we were pretty much able to do whatever we wanted, using whatever skills that we already had or that we could Google. And that was probably the biggest restriction. Like, we had very few, hardline things that we had to do, but we could only achieve so much with, a little over a month's worth of experience. And so that actually segues into kind of the struggles that I was dealing with this week. This week was incredibly fun. I do want to preface by saying that it was fantastic. There were definitely some hard moments in there, but overall it was a really fantastic week. But I do want to express some of the things that I had difficulty with. So the first, like I said, was being restricted by our own knowledge. So they were like, go out and do this, and you can use whatever you know, whatever you can find, which are actually 2 very small categories. So it was definitely frustrating. We would look up inspiration and we'd see something that was amazing, but figuring out how to do that thing turned out to be a lot harder than expected. A lot of it is that either we didn't know it, coming in because we've only been doing HTML for like 2 weeks, or it was really difficult to find the words to Google it, basically. Because you can't just type a paragraph description into Google and expect to find something. So that was definitely one of the struggles from this week. The second was that I personally was trying not to Google very much. I very much wanted to rely on the information that we'd been given and the skills that we had acquired in order to do most of my site, because I didn't want to spend days trying to figure out how to do one thing. So there were definitely things that, I had a very specific vision for, and I knew it wasn't something that I could do. So I would ask for help or spend, some time Googling it. Before at least like 90% of the site, I wanted to use, things that I already knew how to do. And that actually, I surprised myself by, how well my site turned out using, primarily things that I had learned within the last 3 weeks, to be frank. So the last struggle, which is a struggle and a success, was design. So if you remember from my first video, I was in architecture school for 2 years, and a very large component of architecture is design, obviously, but not just of buildings, but of presentation boards and projects and things like that. And so design is something that I've been, in love with and surrounded by for a little over 2 years. And, I stepped out of it, and so to come back into it was exciting in a lot of ways because I was able to do something that I've had a passion for, but was also really frustrating in a lot of ways because it's something that I hadn't done seriously in a while, except for a few small projects of my own. And I think I'd set incredibly high expectations for myself and for my site because design was so important to me. And that definitely resulted in a lot of frustration. I know that I wasted hours and hours trying to perfect something that not only wasn't necessary, but just wasn't, it wasn't worth, the time that I piled into it. But design was also one of the successes of of this project. Segueing into my next point, in that I was able to practice design in the coding field. Like the goal after this program is to combine those two things. So if I can do them separately, at an okay level, which is where I was before this week, then I need to see how I can do them together, which made this week really exciting because I had to combine like the practicality of coding and grid systems and CSS and things like that with, my own personal taste and abilities with design. So kind of using my, my eye for aesthetics to create something that was practical and met the guidelines and was comfortable for the user to interact with, but also, kind of spoke to the things that I found, pleasing to look at and things like that. So that was definitely one of the exciting things from this week. And like I said, I'm not going to show my website in this video just because I do have a presentation on Monday, and I know that my teachers watch these videos, and so I want to make sure that they're not hearing or seeing duplicates of information, basically. But I'll be sure in my next video to briefly go over the website. So going, a little further into the successes of the week, I definitely learned how to do quite a few things. So I said it, a little earlier that I was trying not to Google too much, but that I, was willing to look into things that I thought would be pretty easy to learn and things like that. So for one thing was CSS Animate, which I didn't find on my own, like our professor told us about it, but it wasn't something that we were taught. We were just kind of explained what it was and sent to a website, and it actually turned out to be really fun. And it's just a way to really easily animate text or objects and things like that on our sites. And so it added just a really light dynamic element, and that was something that we hadn't even discussed in class before. So that was definitely one of the more interesting and useful things that I kind of stumbled upon this week. But I also was able to, like I mentioned earlier, use a lot of what I knew, and that was probably the number one success of the week, was being able to use the knowledge that we were given to create something that I'm quite proud of. And that's after only a little over a month of coding, under my belt, and only about a week and a half of HTML and CSS under my belt. So this week was definitely very rewarding in that sense, in that I was able to create something from scratch, almost entirely on my own, and it looked good and it worked. So, and then the last thing, this is, kind of a smaller point, but I do think it's worth mentioning, is that I kind of understood how to organize big, files. So everything we've been doing, all of our projects have had pretty short HTML files, pretty short JavaScript files, pretty short CSS. They've been really concise, small, easy, little 30-minute projects, So being able to organize and comment and navigate through really large files, like I think my CSS was a little over 300 lines, which I don't know if that's a lot or a little, to be quite honest, but it felt like a lot to me. And, keeping all of that organized and making sure that all of my files were linked properly, it's simple stuff like that, and learning how to do that in a way that, I can give this to somebody else and they can also navigate it. I think that was a really important skill from this week as well. And I think that I've pretty much hit all of my points. I know this video was a little different than my others, but this was kind of a new kind of week for us, and again, I'm not feeling super well, but I am really happy with this week. And in my next video, I'll be sure to spend just a couple minutes at the beginning of the video going over my website and the final product and how my presentation went and things like that. And as always, I'll keep you guys updated.